Ryan. I am Chief Value Officer with FinHealth. It's just a fancy way of saying my focus is helping employers increase the value that they derive and demand from the healthcare system. I am a former consultant and broker. I spent 20 years on the consulting and brokerage side. I was focused on evaluating hundreds of point solutions in the market and figuring out what worked, what didn't, what emerging trends were coming into the market. And that's how I stumbled upon FinHealth, where I am today. I also spent time on the employer side, leading benefits and trying to drive down costs. And I've spent time on the provider side, standing up clinics, launching telemedicine programs, and so deep experience in multiple facets of healthcare, and that brought me to the payment space. And today's topic is related to that, around how the rising cost of healthcare is a threat to our national security. So I already gave you a little bit about my background, recovering consultant. And so this is our topic today, and it is your duty as an employer or an advisor, it is your duty to your country to do something about this, to address rising healthcare costs. So a couple of caveats, first and foremost. I am not an expert in national security. I'm a healthcare guy. So I got a little bit of help in putting together this presentation from ChatGPT. And you'll see this throughout the deck. We have about 80 slides in here. I go fast, and we'll go through that in 35 or 40 minutes. But you'll see slides where I ask questions of ChatGPT, and we'll walk through the response that it gives to those questions. Also, second caveat, national security is a big, scary topic, and we will talk about some very scary things. But hopefully, we also look at this a little bit through the lens of some levity of just how ridiculous some of this stuff that's happening is within our country. So I'm going to start at the macro level. Big picture. What are some big threats to the US as a country? And so the first macro level threat is this idea of domestic disinformation and deep fakes. So we're going to break this down. We're already getting to the scary stuff. So here's our first ChatGPT question. I asked the AI, what are the biggest threats to US national security? And this is what it came back with. Espionage, terrorism, foreign influence, weapons of mass destruction, criminal threats, AI threats, climate change. Like, these are real big issues, right? I'm going to circle a few of the words for us. Cyber attacks, domestic, disinformation, competition, deep fakes, infrastructure vulnerabilities. So let's unpack one of those. Deep fakes. You've probably heard about this in the news. Here's an example of video from Jimmy Fallon being reconstituted so it looks like John Oliver. John Oliver takes on the appearance, mannerisms, voice. It looks like John Oliver is saying all of this stuff, but in fact, it was Jimmy Fallon as the source of the video. So it's misrepresenting what someone is seeing. All right, that seems like a fun example with celebrities. But here's where it starts to hit home for us in the real world. This was a story that came out about a finance worker getting on a Zoom call with 3 of his colleagues, one of them being the CFO, and he was instructed to transfer $25 million. Now, I don't know about you, if someone from my C-suite asks me to do something, especially the CFO, I figure they know what they're doing, they know what they're asking me to transfer money. I'm going to listen to them. We're supposed to have all of these security checks and balances and two-factor authentication. And if I get something through email, I'm going to check through text or some other form of communication. But this is live video. I'm in a meeting, and it looks like I'm talking to 3 of my colleagues, when in fact, it was a deep fake. It was 3 hackers trying to defraud and have the person send $25 million to an account that was untraceable, right? These are criminals doing this. I thought I was talking to my CFO, but it was actually someone else instead. This is happening in the real world today. So let's break down what are the components of a deepfake. We will ignore the circle in the upper left. But there are some key words here: manipulation, disinformation, theft, financial fraud, scams. So that's the first takeaway I'm going to leave with you, that deepfakes are a threat to our national security. Now, I've given this presentation a handful of times before, and I've gotten feedback that at this point in the presentation, you probably don't know where I'm going with this. You're probably starting to question, did you choose the right session to sit in? And I promise you, this will all make sense, okay? We will connect the dots here. So macro threat number 2, healthcare drags down our economy. We're all healthcare experts. We probably all intuitively get this, but let's break this down a little bit further, and let's ask ChatGPT, what are the top US GDP categories by percentage? Number 1 is personal consumption, 51%. All of us spending in our day-to-day lives. Number 2 is healthcare. We've probably all heard that healthcare is approaching 20% of GDP. This puts it into perspective. Healthcare is number 2. It's the second biggest thing that we spend money on. Then there's private investment, which is business capital and residential. There's state and local government spending that's not healthcare. Number 5 is federal defense spending. We spend about 3.5% on defense. This is how it ties to national security. Healthcare spending is more than 5 times what we spend on national security. This is how we look at things at FinHealth, where 25% to 30% of overall healthcare spending is wasteful. And Donovan, in his opening presentation, had a similar statistic. These are the types of things that we flag for at FinHealth. Issues related to eligibility, coding issues, missed discounts, duplicates, provider billing. The simplest way to think about this is think about the fraud detection that your credit card companies do for your own personal spending. We do that in healthcare. This technology exists, yet I see all the anti-BUCA stuff for a reason. A lot of this funnels through the BUCAs, and they're making money off of it, unfortunately. The bigger the overall spend, the more money they make. That's why there's so much waste within the system today. So let's go back to that question for what we spend money on as a country. 25 to 30% is wasteful. That's 4 to 6% of overall US GDP. That's wasteful. Imagine if we had 4 to 6% to reinvest in something else, anything else besides healthcare. It could be AI, new technologies, upskilling, trying to get our workforce ready for the new evolution that's occurring. All these other categories we could reinvest. Defense, national security, all of those threats that we're faced with. 4 to 6% would double, more than double, what we spend on national security. So that just helps put things into perspective of how much waste there is in the system. I think we've all seen charts like this, where the US has the most expensive healthcare in the world. But look at this magnitude. It's 50 to 100% more expensive. And what do we get for that? Amongst our peers, amongst the developed world, first world countries, we rank near the bottom or dead last in every single category except for one. Overall, we're last. Access, last. Administrative efficiency and equity, second to last. Outcomes, last. The only place where we're doing okay is care process. So we spend a lot. We don't have much to show for it. And there's a lot of people fighting over the system. There's some people fighting to change it. There's a lot of people fighting to keep it the way it is. So you look at these red bars. This is how much these different interest groups spend on lobbying. $750 million a year. Pharma, providers, insurance companies. Those are the red bars. $750 million just spent on lobbying. That is 3 times the next industry, which is electronics manufacturing. That's how much the status quo is trying to protect their interests. So the key takeaway here, we spend the most in the world. We get the least in return. All right, so we talked about macro level threats. Now we'll bring it down a level and talk about micro level threats to employers, to your clients, to your customers, to you as a business. I'm a healthcare guy, so the number one threat that I'm going to talk about is healthcare for employers. And so let me ask ChatGPT, well, what does the AI think the biggest threats to employers are today? And you don't see healthcare on any of this, except for the well-being one, number 7. It's ransomware, supply chain disruptions, immigration enforcement, workplace violence, compliance, quiet quitting, burnout, DEI backlash, AI insecurity, distrust of HR. It's where we feel really depressed about this presentation, right? All this sucks. This is the biggest leap I am going to ask you to make in this session. I came across this quote and I thought it was quite fitting. 99% of all problems can be solved with money. And the other 1%, there's alcohol. Okay, so let me look at that list of employer problems that ChatGPT says. And my argument is at least half of these could be solved with more money. If your clients and customers had more budget to invest, reinvest, protect themselves against these threats, to prepare, they would be able to outcompete their peers in their industry. They would be able to prepare themselves better for the future against these types of threats. So if I asked ChatGPT, what are the top people costs that US employers spend money on? Number 2 is healthcare. You probably all know this. Number 1 is salaries, right? Number 2, healthcare is the number 2 people cost behind salaries. I would argue it is the least managed expense within any company because employers hand over a checkbook, they pay a premium or they're self-funded, and they have a lot of trust and hope with carriers, TPAs, PBMs that money is being spent wisely on their behalf. It's been said, employers have a product or service that they make, but they're also running a healthcare company alongside it. GM is a healthcare company that happens to make cars. Starbucks has spent more on healthcare than coffee beans. Right? That seems like a wild disconnect for how much this is dragging down what we want to build and produce and sell. So here's an interesting spin on that question to ChatGPT. What are the top things that US employers waste money on? The AI knows. Number one, inefficient healthcare spending. Then there's administrative inefficiency, small expenses, corporate retreats, overuse of consultants. That was an interesting one. But number one, inefficient healthcare spending. And we've seen charts like this. You look at the last 100 years, 100 years ago, how much we used to spend on healthcare. It was nothing. This is a literal cancer that has infested our system. It's outpacing everything. And the impact is professional and personal. It's hitting our personal pocketbooks directly. So the key takeaway here, healthcare is a drag on employer and personal budgets. And the second threat for employers, litigation risk. There's a growing number of employers who are suing their health plan partners, carriers, PBMs, TPAs around breach of fiduciary, conflicts of interest, non-disclosure of fees, not paying what's contracted, paying overbilled amounts. And now we're seeing a growing number of employees suing their employers, asking, is the employer doing everything that they can and should be as plan fiduciary to protect the member? Because if the plan pays $10,000 for something that should have only cost $100,000, well, that overage is split between the employer and the employee. Whether it's this year's budget or next year, it's in the form of deductible, coinsurance, paycheck contributions. That employee is paying for it in some shape or form. So they have a right to ask, is HR doing everything they can and should be? And are you, as advisors, helping protect your clients against this? So I asked ChatGPT, what's the likelihood that US employers will be sued for breach of fiduciary? There's a lot of words on this, but at the very bottom, the takeaway is, yes, the risk of getting sued is moderate to high. This is coming. This has all happened before. It's happened on the retirement plan side. It took 10 years for the first employer to get sued for 401k and pension violations when those regulations got passed. And over the next 10 years, 800 employers got sued on the retirement plan side. On the healthcare side, it's been just over 3 years, and we've already started to see a handful of employers get sued. Can HR be named in these lawsuits? The takeaway, absolutely, HR can be named. This is personal risk. Your clients need to be under that umbrella policy. So, healthcare litigation is a risk both professionally and personally. So this is what we've talked about so far. 4 takeaways. Deepfakes are a threat to national security. We spend the most on healthcare and receive the least. Healthcare is a drain on employer budgets. Healthcare litigation is a professional and personal risk. This is where I start to blend everything together and make sense of this entire story arc for us. And when you blend this together, you come away with this overarching theme. Healthcare deepfakes are a threat to our country, our companies, and our jobs. So let's go back to the deep fake definition. These key words here: manipulation, disinformation, theft, financial fraud, and scams. That begs the question, what does a healthcare deepfake look like? So the work at FinHealth, we review claims prepayment and postpayment. We look at large claims, real time or near time, and we will look at summary bills like this. This is a UBO4, tells us who's the provider, what were the services, what was the initial billed amount, which is $1.7 million down in the bottom middle in this real example, and what was the allowed amount, which is $1.1 million in the lower right. Now, the discount is 33% off of this. And the carrier is going to say they saved $600,000 on this claim. Aren't you happy? Well, the discount's artificial. The billed amount's a made-up number. It's not grounded in reality. You can make it whatever you want. I'm still stuck with $1 million bill at the end of this. And we don't see carriers, TPAs, questioning the underlying charges. Who's to say that should be $1 million? 800,000? 500,000? What's the right amount for the actual services that were rendered? So much of this is just auto-adjudicated. It's an outlier, 33% off. They're done with it. In fact, the higher the claims, the more money they make. So they don't want to take this off. And if you force them to, they're going to take a percentage shared savings off the back end, right? 25 to 40% through their payment integrity fee. They're making money every single direction possible. So we'll review this same day. 75% of the time we tell our clients, we can't justify the expense. We need the itemized bill. We will reprice every single line item on this itemized bill within 48 hours. We will find inconsistencies and errors within specific line items. Here's an actual example of nitric oxide being billed at $5,000 an hour. That is 35 times higher than what it should cost. It's actually 21 times higher than what this provider has stated in the hospital transparency files. So someone's lying, and the carrier's allowing them to get away with it. Now, this was $5,000 an hour for 24 hours a day for 90 days straight. This is overbilled by millions of dollars for this single case. We got an $8 million bill reduced down to $2 million by finding things like this. And so this is a summary that we'll take back to our clients. In this example, it's $1.1 million. That's the starting point from the carrier. And when we reprice this and look at all these benchmarks, all the benchmarks say it should be lower costs, somewhere between $80,000 and $269,000. We show Medicare CMS in blue. We don't expect employers to pay a Medicare rate. But if you take two and a half times that at 250% of Medicare, it's a more than fair price that provider will be happy with, and they'll make a profit off of. The American Hospital Association has said that Medicare covers 90% of their expense on average. Commercial rates cover 140%. So you pay them at $250, they'll take it. They want to get paid something. They don't want this to sit out there. So that's the leverage of prepayment, to be able to reduce these charges down. 95% of the time when we present this information to the providers, we get a reduction. This is a healthcare deepfake. We are being misled. This is manipulation, disinformation, theft, fraud, and a scam. We are being gaslit. Thought it'd be interesting to share some actual quotes. when FinHealth presents this information to carriers and TPAs, these are their responses. So here in green, FinHealth is asking, why are you charging $228,000 above the highest published chargemaster rate? Their actual written response back to us: they do not follow chargemaster rates. What? Why do we have those then? How long will it take to get credit back from these duplicates? In cases like this, where the provider's already been paid, it can take up to 2 years to get your money back. This is their mistake. They allowed this to happen with your customer's money. They're making you wait 2 years. Why was this claim paid at 273% more than your network's published chargemaster rate? Sorry. Our agreements include provisions that may result in exceeding billed charges. So they're paying more than what the allowed amount is. The quote's wrong here, but the quote should have been, why are you paying an allowed amount higher than the billed amount? The provider asked for $20,000 and you paid them $40,000. Why are you paying them more than what they billed? Their response: their agreement includes provisions that may exceed billed charges. Their contract sucks. Your clients are footing the bill. Why was this claim paid at 1,300% of Medicare? I was shocked to get this response back in writing. They do not determine fair prices. This network, these discounts that are supposed to be best in class, they're leveraging their market share to negotiate with providers on your behalf and pass along those savings to you. When you call them out on it, they have no defense. They can't even stand behind what is a fair price. It's such a disconnect from what they're actually asking you to pay at the end of the day. So here are some 5 examples that we've seen. $700,000 charge for kidney organ donation. Now, these are screenshots from our software, but when we reprice this in this market for this same procedure, the cost should be between $40,000 and $60,000. On this single claim, we saved our client $500,000. We reduced it from $700,000 down to $200,000. Now, $200,000 is still too much to pay, but that provider was still making money, right? They know, compared to the market rate, $40,000 to $60,000, they're going to be happy with $200,000. Our client was happy also, because they didn't pay the BUCA rate of $700,000. Here's a provider charging $1.8 million for home infusion. So this is a very sick individual. The table's busy, I apologize, but every 2 to 3 weeks, this is a member that gets an injection that costs anywhere between $100,000 and $300,000 for medication. That should cost $27,000 a shot. And when we looked at that provider's other contracts with other networks, they were getting paid $27,000. So we were able to successfully negotiate this down and go backwards and get money back to the tune of $1.3 million for what had been overcharged in the past. And then every 2 to 3 weeks, we save another $77,000 by having this reduced rate. Sometimes the errors are simple. Here's using one breast pump and getting billed for 181. Maybe it's a fat-fingered error, inputted incorrectly. This alone saved $68,000 for one of our clients. $100,000 for air ambulance. We have the No Surprises Act. It's supposed to protect us from these surprise billings. We've heard about the IDR challenges. This is 118 miles. We called this out. with the BUCA, said, hey, this was overpaid by $80,000. They researched it, they validated it, they had the gall to come back to our client and say, hey, we agree, do you want us to get the $80,000 back? Yes, of course, and we want you to address the other cases that we've identified. They don't want to take action on this, even if they agree to it. You have to hold them accountable. And then this last example, $25,000 for a CT scan. So this comes from one of our clients' data. It's not rocket science to graph this out. CT scans are basically a commodity. You put a patient in a machine, push some buttons, and you get a reading. There should be a narrow range for how much this costs. About $810 in the state of New Jersey. Yet when we graph this out, we see a provider repeatedly being reimbursed over $25,000. Multiple times. It's not a mistake. When we asked the BUCA, what's going on with this provider? Why are they being reimbursed $25,000? Their response? This is the in-network contracted rate. It is what it is. That's the supposed discount that they've negotiated. This is highway robbery. This is like buying an iPhone for the price of a car. No one would agree to this. And this is the fiduciary risk that employers have. We tell our benefits buyers, hey, look at your colleagues in finance, procurement, legal, accounts payable. If any other part of your business had a $50,000 charge come in, would they just pay it automatically? Or do they have some internal controls in place to make sure that this is accurate, that this is fair market pricing, that we've benchmarked this, that we've negotiated this? Why do we allow it in healthcare? Why do we hand over all that power and trust to networks, carriers, TPAs, PBMs? So as we wrap things up here, a couple more quotes. This takes work. I fully admit that. Doing something costs something, time, investment, resources. But doing nothing also costs something. But sometimes ignorance is bliss until we reveal what's going on behind the curtain. Now that we know, maybe it's time to do something about it. Quite often, doing nothing costs a lot more. I think this is the last ChatGPT question. There's a lot of text on here, but what will happen if in the US if healthcare costs don't stop increasing at an 8 to 10% rate? The takeaway is it's all bad. It's bad for us as individual households. It's bad for employers. Employers are going to start cutting back. It's bad for providers. Providers are going to be incented to only do expensive care. They're going to stop doing the preventive stuff. And now it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The government is going to cut back on Medicare and Medicaid. And it's going to slow down overall economic growth. And if the government cuts back on Medicare and Medicaid, what happens? Higher costs for employers. Right? Providers have to make up the money somehow. They're going to charge more to employers. I promise, I said this wasn't going to get depressing. It feels really bad, right? It's only going to get worse. So there are some things that we can do. At FinHealth, we have a whole list of contract recommendations. We see our employer clients increasing the expectations of what they have in their SPDs and the protections to be able to review these charges. on a near-time or real-time basis for claims above $100,000, right? Let's set a high threshold. Might only be a handful. It should be the claims that the carrier already has eyeballs on, if they're supposedly your partner in this. But there are protections that you can put in place to increase the expectations. I have seen a lot of note-taking and photo taking. So if you'd like a copy of this presentation, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share it with you. So to recap the overall story arc, we talked about macro-level threats to the US. We talked about micro-level threats. The overall takeaway, healthcare deepfakes are a threat to our national security, our budgets, and our jobs. The fact that we are being gaslit. We walked through some specific healthcare examples, and we talked a little bit about what you can do today. But more specifically, for the next large claim that comes in, pend it. Stop it. Don't automatically pay it. Question it. Ask for itemized bill. Ask for the UB04 bill summary. Start to ask questions. Certainly, this takes time and resources. And at FinHealth, we have software to be able to analyze this very quickly. But you need to start asking questions, and we have clients who are building this into their SPD, that they have the right to review itemized bills for claims over a certain dollar amount. These are your financial records. It's your right and your fiduciary duty to check the numbers. And you're probably paying the carrier for shared savings payment integrity today. Ask for a full reconciliation. And don't take the first report. The first report, they're going to try and glaze over, here's in total, and here's what we saved, and aren't you happy? Have them tie back to specific claims. And what we've found when we do the investigation, a lot of those savings are made up. They're illusory. They're taking credit for things that aren't happening or shouldn't have been allowed to happen in the first place. Your clients are paying for it. Find the outliers, question the inconsistencies, refuse to pay. It's your ERISA obligation. It's your patriotic obligation. That's all I have. Thank you very much. We probably have a little bit of time for questions if anyone has questions, or if it's all shock and awe and it's just like you don't know what to think anymore, that's totally fine also. But if anyone has any questions, happy to take them, and I'll hang out afterwards as well. Yeah, right here.
Hold on, I'm coming to help you with the microphone. Hold on.
Do you see what I see, which is employers having a strategy to fire high-expense employees? So I'm involved in 2 litigations now, one against Tory Burch. Strategy 1 is to call the employee and say, your spouse has better coverage, you should switch to them. If you don't have a spouse, they sound a little surprised. And then they build a series of targeted job descriptions you can't meet, so eventually they fire you for cause and then settle for less than what the net present value of your claims would be. Case in point is one of my daughters.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. We don't touch that. That sounds sensitive, and obviously you'd want to go through all the right legal procedures to have things documented the right way. But certainly there are high-cost individuals. We're looking at whether or not that cost is fair and appropriate, and we're successful in being able to negotiate that down. But there's certainly other tactics that can be used as well. Thank you.
So a question for you. One of the things that employees often worry about when they're advocating for the fiduciary duty is to them under ERISA. but they don't want to be a troublemaker. And I'm curious if you have a call to action for employees where the way I frame it when I try to explain this, which doesn't always work, is you're protecting your employer from any, because like you may have noticed something, but by advocating for fiduciary duty in your plan to you, you're making sure that loose cannon in the other room doesn't go and sue them for something that's a big problem. You're letting them know there's a big problem, and in the process, you're generating an email to compliance at whoever your employer is so that they're aware and can act appropriately. Is that the right framing from your perspective, or are there other ways employees cannot worry that they're being a disloyal member of the team, but still work together to protect their employer against that loose cannon who could say anything?
Yeah.
Because I think there are huge vulnerabilities legally and from a liability status, and like the loyal employee who just wants to bring up the problem, and it's also beneficial to their care, may be in a position to protect their company from huge losses. Question mark, do you buy it? Are there other calls to actions for plan members that you would advise?
Yeah. We do work on some individual cases. I would say that approach might work for some personality types who want to stick their neck out, or we're all in this together. Let me do this because it's the right thing to do. I think most people don't want to be that person necessarily. I should clarify, for FinHealth at least, we're not member facing. We run behind the scenes, we work through HR, and in 12 years, we've never had a member balance build. Because the prices that we're agreeing to with the providers are still fair, and the providers are still profiting, but it's a much lower cost than what's being passed through the insurance carrier. So it's still a fair payment to that provider. The only time a member is aware of what we might have had our fingerprints on is if they get a refund check for something that member overpaid for. But even then, they don't know it's because of FinHealth. They just figure the insurance carrier reprocessed and corrected something. So we've taken that approach because for that exact reason, members are hard to engage around things like this. It might be an individual situation that they're trying to work through and they want to do the right thing. Unfortunately, largely, employees and members pick up 20, 25%. They hit a deductible, hit an out-of-pocket. The employer share is so much greater. Once the member hits their cap, they're like, well, it's out of my hands. I'm not necessarily going to benefit as an individual, even though my employer is at risk for the rest of the charges.
Got a question back here. You've said BUCA a lot. So I was under the impression that if my client, is renting Cigna's network, for instance, right? And let's use the $25,000 CT scan, for example. Let's say that Cigna screwed up and that's their negotiated rate with the hospital. How are you actually fighting that if the client's agreement is that we're paying based on the Cigna contracted rate? Like, how is that hospital system not just saying, screw you? Like, what are the steps that y'all are taking to actually overcome that?
Yeah. So I don't want to mislead or speak incorrectly. It's a very fluid environment right now. And this is a new approach. And we see success with large and jumbo employers being able to set new expectations and pave the way. But we do have small clients. We have small customers, 200 lives, 600 lives. There are small groups that are able to achieve this, but carriers do say no. They are more willing to say no to small groups, and that's just how it is right now. That doesn't mean that the risk goes away. Employers are stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's either that contract that the ASA that they've agreed to pay some provider contract that they have no negotiation in, or their ERISA obligation. And right now, ERISA is front and center, and every employer is trying to grapple with increasing costs and have some answers for their leadership. So we see a lot more attention here. It's not a perfect silver bullet by any means, but we have success by just having more conversation and customers and advisors asking about this The carriers know this is coming. It's just a matter of when.
Hey, Chris, Pat Moore, you crushed it, by the way, brother. Good work.
Thank you.
The hook got me as a jarhead. It's something that I've said for a long time. Literally, the Department of Defense spends more on healthcare than the entire United States Marine Corps. It's a wild fact. But with what you're doing, it's incredible. What are the carriers? What are the circumstances that are the toughest? Like, what are the BUCAs that are just the hardest to work with?
Well, I will say United Healthcare for the longest time was the most difficult to work with. They still are challenging. They're the biggest. They have the most to lose. And you look at the Fortune 20, 6 are healthcare companies. This is big business in this country. Now, United Healthcare employs the most providers also. 10% of providers in this country work for United Healthcare. So they're negotiating both sides of the table, and there are studies that show they pay themselves more, no surprise. So huge conflicts left and right. So up until last March, United Healthcare said no, they don't allow any third-party external review. And they would give employers and advisors a sheet of who they quote-unquote had as approved vendors. And FinHealth wasn't on the list. Now, if you looked at that list of approved vendors, every single one had some financial or strategic relationship with United Healthcare. Again, no surprise, right? They're making money off of it. Now, we have a global agreement with United Healthcare to get data, to be able to do this analysis. They're not yet at prepayment, but we've had high-level strategic discussions with them about how that would work, because they've admitted this is coming. They have to be able to do this. So that's refreshing. 18 months ago, it was crickets. So that's a one-off example, but there is change happening in the market, and we see more and more employers and advisors engaging with us. Thank you.
We have time for one more question. Who wants to be last? Okay.